You know, if you look at how human beings used to build something like, say, a medieval cathedral, the project literally took centuries.
Oh, absolutely. Generations.
Right. So the stonemason who was like carving a gargoyle way high up on a wall, they knew with absolute certainty that they would never see the finished spire.
Yeah, they were just one tiny piece of it.
Exactly. They were contributing their labor to this blueprint that just completely dwarfed their own individual lifespan.
I mean, it was basically this massive outward projection of meaning, right? You were a small part of a really huge intergenerational project. And that scale is what gave your daily mundane work a profound sense of purpose.
Right. But today, it feels like we've taken all of that monumental architectural energy, all of that reverence and dedication, and we've just turned it completely inward.
Yeah, we really have.
Like we are all still trying to build a cathedral, but the cathedral is, well, it's ourselves. So today, we are tackling a concept that sits at the very top of modern society's values, right? The absolute pinnacle of Abraham Maslow's famous pyramid. We're looking at self-fulfillment and, this endless, exhausting quest to, quote-unquote, find yourself.
And looking through the stack of philosophical essays and cultural critiques and psychological research we're diving into today, it's actually staggering to see how quickly this cathedral of the ego became our primary religion.
It really is wild.
Yeah.
So the mission for this deep dive is to deconstruct what these sources are arguing, which is that treating your life as a never-ending personal renovation project might actually be the exact thing making you miserable.
Yeah, which is a pretty bold claim.
It is, because it naturally begs the question. If self-fulfillment is the ultimate cultural goal, and, I mean, we have more tools than ever to achieve it, why isn't it working for us? Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the baseline assumption we all walk around with today is that the drive for self-expression is a biological imperative.
Like it's hardwired into us.
Exactly. We treat the need to find our true, authentic self like it's eating or sleeping, right? Like a fundamental human need. But the historical texts we're looking at reveal that it is a remarkably recent and, frankly, a kind of peculiar cultural invention.
Wait, really? Peculiar how?
Well, for the vast majority of human history, a life turned entirely inward wouldn't just be viewed as selfish. It would be completely unintelligible.
Because historically, the good life was, it was always defined by relation, duty, and contribution.
Exactly.
If you look at Confucian role ethics, you literally define who you are through your obligations to your family and your society. You are a sibling, a child, a citizen.
Yeah, you don't exist outside of that network.
Right. Or if you look at indigenous cultures, they root communal identity deep in the land of the tribe. You simply didn't exist in a vacuum.
You see the exact same pattern in ancient Greek civic virtue, too, or the medieval Christian concept of vocation.
Right.
In all of these pre-modern frameworks, you didn't just pack up and wander off to find yourself in isolation. You were called forth by your responsibilities.
That makes a lot of sense.
And what the sources emphasize here is the immense psychological safety those systems provided.
Oh, interesting. Safety from what?
From existential dread, honestly. Like, if you were a medieval blacksmith, your identity was firmly tethered to your town and your craft. You didn't wake up at 3 a.m. in a panic, wondering if blacksmithing was your truest passion. Or, if you were failing to self-actualize.
Yeah, your identity was just secure. You didn't have the crushing burden of inventing your own meaning from scratch every single morning.
Exactly.
Which brings us to this incredibly pervasive metaphor we use today to try and handle that burden. Like we are constantly sold this idea of the seed.
Oh, the seed metaphor, yes.
Right. The myth is that you possess this predetermined, highly authentic core seed, just waiting for the right conditions, the right therapy, or the right job to finally bloom into your true self.
But the contemporary neuroscience, the Buddhist philosophy, and modern psychoanalytic thought in our sources.
They all disagree.
Yeah, they all converge on one very uncomfortable truth. The unified, stable, true self is a fiction.
Wow.
It is a narrative construction. We are not seeds waiting to bloom, We are a fluid process.
Process over product.
Exactly. We're continuously being assembled and reassembled from our relationships, our language, our culture, and just our circumstances.
So trying to find your true selves is basically like peeling an onion. You keep stripping away layers, trying to find this solid, authentic core, only to realize the layers themselves are all that exist.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. And if the self is entirely fluid, then trying to definitively fulfill it is, well, it's like building a sandcastle and calling it architecture. It's just structurally impossible.
And because you can never definitively find a fluid, ever-changing self, you end up trapped in this state of permanent striving.
You're just constantly running.
Yeah, you are chasing a finish line that doesn't exist. And psychologists actually have a term for this specific trap. They call it the arrival fallacy.
Oh, I've heard of this. This is that incredibly seductive illusion that once we reach a certain state of growth, our existential anxiety is just going to vanish.
Yep, that's the one.
We all know this feeling,
Right.
and it's the belief that if I just lock in the perfect 5 a.m. morning routine, or if I just get that promotion, or if we go on this one intensive silent retreat, then I will finally arrive, like I'll be fixed.
But you never arrive. Because
Yeah.
the modern ideology of human potential has no natural ceiling. The goalposts are perpetually in motion.
They just keep moving.
Let's look at that morning routine example. You buy the expensive planner, you wake up at 5 a.m., you do the cold plunge.
Sounds exhausting already.
Right, and for a week you feel fantastic. But eventually the novelty wears off and ordinary human anxiety creeps back in.
Of course it does.
And because the framework of self-fulfillment demands perfection, it immediately requires you to identify a new deficiency to fix. So you think, maybe my morning routine failed because my attachment style is wrong. Or maybe it's my gut microbiome.
Wait, this sounds structurally identical to chasing wealth or chasing corporate status.
It really is.
Like you get the raise, and for a month it's great, but then you immediately adjust and you just want a bigger raise. You uncover one authentic desire, and suddenly you have to dig for another one. It's just a horizon that keeps receding.
Exactly, because the mechanics are identical. It functions exactly like the pursuit of limitless wealth. It's an infinite target.
And what's the toll of that?
Well, the psychological toll of an infinite target is that it introduces this profound performance anxiety into our daily lives. If you are told by society that you are destined for peak actualization, that you absolutely must live your best life, then an ordinary mundane Tuesday suddenly feels like a massive failure.
Life turns into a high-stakes exam where you're constantly grading your own vibes. You develop this, psychological claustrophobia.
Yeah, and you're just trapped in your own head.
And it paralyzes you with the tyranny of choice. Like if you're told you can and must fulfill every possible version of yourself, how do you ever commit to just being one thing?
You don't. You get stuck in analysis paralysis.
Exactly. And let's be entirely real here. Looking at the cultural critiques in our stack, well, actually, this moving target is incredibly profitable.
Massively profitable.
This state of permanent insufficiency sustains massive global industries.
The industrialization of the self, right? The
Yeah.
wellness industry, the experience economy, the whole coaching industrial complex.
Yeah, it's huge.
Their entire economic model literally depends on you remaining permanently and productively unfulfilled.
Wow. Productively unfulfilled.
Think about it. If you actually woke up one day, felt completely satisfied with who you are, and just went about your business, multi-billion-dollar industries would collapse overnight. You are the customer, but your identity is the product being endlessly renovated.
And the sources point out how this ideology provides a really convenient smokescreen for society, too. It individualizes structural problems.
This is such an important point.
Like, you're exhausted because you're working 3-gig economy jobs to pay rent. But the culture tells you your exhaustion is a mindset issue or, blocked potential that requires a $500 wellness retreat to fix.
Right. We are sold meditation apps and self-care routines to fix a soul that is actually suffering from the fractures of a broken collective.
A broken collective, yeah.
We're talking about intense economic precarity, the loss of third spaces, and epidemic levels of social isolation. When we frame all our pain as a failure of personal self-actualization, we completely let the structural realities off the hook.
So it promises liberation, but the mechanism actually just delivers a cycle of durable consumption.
Precisely.
The realization that this inward obsession drains our energy, hides societal flaws, and empties our wallets is alarming enough. But there is an even darker consequence in these readings. We need to look at how this perpetual internal focus fundamentally degrades how we treat the people around us.
Yeah, this part is heavy. When self-fulfillment becomes the primary overriding project of your life, a quietly devastating reorientation happens in your social world.
What happens?
Other people cease to be ends in themselves. They get downgraded. They become mirrors to reflect our identity or catalysts to spark our personal growth, or worse, just obstacles in the way of our journey.
So love morphs from a commitment that you honor into a resource that you consume.
Exactly.
And what the sources find so insidious is how we do this today. Like, we've developed this incredibly sophisticated language to justify treating people as disposable. We use modern therapy speak to provide ethical cover for abandoning inconvenient obligations.
Yes, the weaponization of mental health language. You hear phrases all the time like, I need to honor my truth, or I am protecting my peace, or this relationship no longer serves my growth.
Here's where it gets really interesting because the sources argue that, at its worst, this behavior is just ordinary narcissism and selfishness, but it's dressed up in a highly evolved spiritual vocabulary.
It's the perfect disguise.
Right. Why is that therapy speak so seductive? Because it allows us to avoid the difficult, messy friction of compromise.
It provides an intellectual shield against guilt. Historically, deep human fulfillment has always required subordinating our momentary desires to enduring obligations.
Like what?
Well, taking care of an aging parent, raising children, or just maintaining a marriage through a deeply boring or difficult multi-year stretch. But a culture obsessed with self-fulfillment valorizes exit over endurance.
Exit over endurance.
Wow! It places personal authenticity way above interpersonal loyalty.
And if your only loyalty is to your own growth trajectory, you have absolutely no bedrock for when times actually get hard.
Yeah.
Like, if you cut and run every time a relationship stops serving your growth, you're going to end up completely alone.
Which brings us to the pivotal question of this entire deep dive. If focusing purely inward leads to instrumentalizing our loved ones, draining our wallets, and trapping ourselves in constant anxiety, what is the alternative?
Yeah, how do we actually build character and find meaning without falling into the self-actualization trap?
The sources point us to the exact opposite of self-focus. They introduce the concept of self-transcendence.
Self-transcendence. Okay, break that down.
If you examine the deepest, most profoundly reported experiences of human meaning across cultures, they almost never involve expanding the self.
They don't.
No. Think of the intense love of holding your newborn child, or the creative absorption of losing yourself in painting or coding, or just genuine, anonymous service to a community in need.
Right.
These experiences all share a common mechanism, the temporary dissolution of the ego.
Self-forgetting. You are so fiercely engaged with something outside of yourself that the constant nagging voice of the ego just goes quiet.
Exactly. Fulfillment isn't a destination you can map out, navigate toward, and plant a flag in. It is a byproduct.
A byproduct of what?
The sources argue that admirable character traits like wisdom, courage, resilience, they accrue only to those who are oriented toward a cause, a community, or a faith.
So you don't become a good person by aggressively trying to be one.
Right. Or by analyzing your own goodness in a journal. You become one by caring about something else enough to subordinate yourself to it.
But wait, I'm struggling with this on a practical level. We're told our whole lives that ultimate freedom, keeping your options open, being able to pivot at any moment, is the highest goal of modern life.
Right.
It's completely counterintuitive to think that locking yourself into a constraint, like mastering a single craft or staying in a difficult but worthy marriage, actually makes you more fully developed than someone keeping all their options open.
It feels counterintuitive because we've all inherited this romantic ideal, capital R, romanticism, that the self only truly flourishes in total, uninhibited freedom.
Right, like we just need to be completely untethered.
We believe that rules and commitments stifle our true nature, but the psychological and historical evidence suggests the exact opposite. Limits possess a generative power. Constraints actually call the self-worth.
Oh, like the text uses this brilliant metaphor of a poet writing a sonnet to explain this mechanism, right?
Yes, the sonnet metaphor.
If a poet only ever writes free verse, where they can use any word, any rhythm, any length, they might write some good stuff, but they are never forced to push past their first instincts. But a sonnet has strict, unforgiving rules, 14 lines, a specific meter, a rigid rhyme scheme.
And because the poet cannot just say whatever they want, whenever they want, they are forced to search for the perfect, unexpected word to fit the constraint.
The boundary forces their brilliance to the surface.
Exactly. The constraint generates the depth.
And it maps perfectly onto human relationships, too. Like, the sources talk about how a parent develops profound layers of character precisely through the irreversible, exhausting choices of raising children.
Yeah, parenting is the ultimate constraint.
You can't just swipe left on a toddler having a meltdown at 2 a.m. You can't say, this tantrum no longer serves my growth.
No, you really can't, because exit is not an option. The constraint forces you to adapt. It forces you to grow thicker skin, to develop deeper empathy, to discover reserves of patience you didn't even know you had.
The commitment generates the character.
Yes. This is why the philosophical texts we're looking at argue that integrity, which is the alignment of your actions with your fixed principles, is a far more robust metric for a good life than fulfillment.
Because integrity holds firm even when the vibes are incredibly bad.
That's a great way to put it.
Like if you are operating on fulfillment, what do you do when the work gets boring? You quit. But if you are operating on integrity to a commitment, you have a floor to stand on.
The person bound by genuine commitment who has navigated the friction of staying is almost always more fully developed, more complex, and more grounded than the person endlessly preserving their optionality to maximize their self-exploration.
So what does this all mean? If this outward focus and commitment to duty is the answer, it raises a massive red flag for me.
Oh, what's the red flag?
If we tell people to completely abandon their inner desires for the sake of duty, constraints, and community, aren't we just moving backward to oppressive historical eras, where, frankly, large groups of people were just expected to shut up, sacrifice themselves, and do what they were told by those in power?
That is the necessary nuance here, absolutely. And we must be very careful not to swing the pendulum to the absolute opposite extreme.
Right.
The sources are explicit about this danger. The suppression of individual interiority is a genuine, devastating harm. We see the horrific results of demanding total self-forgetting in authoritarian political movements or in coercive religious communities.
And in patriarchal cultures that demand total chronic self-sacrifice from specific groups like women or marginalized classes.
Exactly.
So we have to credit the feminist, anti-colonial, and humanist traditions here, because they did the heavy, necessary moral work of insisting on the value of individual experience against systems that actively tried to erase it. They fought incredibly hard to say, I have an inner life and I matter as an individual.
Absolutely. Everyone has an inner life that deserves recognition. Chronic self-abnegation, where you are forced to serve others without any legitimate claim to your own boundaries or needs, is damaging and fundamentally unjust.
It's not about becoming a doormat.
Not at all. But the text makes a brilliant, vital distinction here to resolve this tension. Respecting the inner life, acknowledging your own needs, and setting healthy boundaries. That is a moral minimum.
A moral minimum, it's the baseline of a functioning, healthy society. You had to have a self before you can transcend it.
Yes, but treating self-fulfillment as the primary purpose of existence, that is where it crosses into a cultural pathology.
I see.
There is an enormous distance between having a self that deserves respect and legal protection and making the elaboration of that self the sole focal point of the universe.
It's the difference between ensuring you have a voice versus making your voice the only thing you ever listen to.
That is the perfect synthesis, and it brings us to the grand irony detailed across all our sources today.
Which is?
The things our culture most confidently identifies as the entire point of human life. Maximizing your potential, chasing peak experiences, obsessing over self-actualization, and curating an authentic identity are almost invariably the things that hollow life out when pursued directly. The self is found only when it is the vehicle for something greater, not the destination itself.
Which brings us back to you listening to this.
Okay.
Because as a curious learner, someone who actively seeks out new information, who clearly values growth and understanding, you are right in the crosshairs of this cultural pressure.
Definitely.
You probably feel this immense crushing weight to constantly optimize your potential. The cultural script is screaming at you to find your true calling, to build your personal brand, to hack your habits, and to curate a perfectly fulfilled existence.
But maybe the most liberating thing you can do is to give yourself permission to step off that treadmill.
Yeah, just step off.
The deepest paradox of the human experience is that you find yourself, if you find yourself at all, precisely by looking somewhere else.
It's about giving yourself permission to stop obsessing over being your best self and instead focusing on the simple, quiet stewardship of your days.
Stewardship, I like that.
And what does that actually look like on a random Tuesday? It means doing good work for its own sake, not because it builds your brand. It means tending to your immediate community, checking in on a friend when it's entirely inconvenient for you, and honoring your commitments even when the novelty is worn off.
It means accepting that ordinary, unglamorous days aren't a failure of your potential. They are the actual material of a meaningful life.
Let's circle back to where we started today, to that image of the stonemasons carving gargoyles into a cathedral they would never see finished. If you stop treating your life as a never-ending personal renovation project and stop trying so desperately to find yourself, what might you finally have the free time and energy to build that could outlast you?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.